Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. Folks, I tell you, I don't know where to start at this point in time. I mean, we got so many issues that are sitting on the table today. I mean, economic, political, livability issues. I mean, when you think about yourself personally, livability issues, I mean, what's going to be on the table in some cases for many folks? I mean, working conditions. And then we're sitting up in the city of Portland, in the state of Oregon aspect of it. We're national news. We're national components. I mean, the doors are open for a lot of folks, and we've got interested elected officials. And then we're abutting ourselves right here in the state of Washington, i.e. Vancouver. See, the phones are ringing right now. So I'll cut this thing off at the same time. But anyway, I thought we're at a point now that as I see the Voters Digest, and here I've been interviewing folks and interviewing some of the stuff that I've done in the past, and in all due respect, it's nothing different. I've been around here for a number of years doing this stuff, and we're just going circles and circles, and it gets worse. The circles are getting worse and worse. How do you cover this stuff? When I started thinking about when I was a young whippersnapper, when I was in the Marine Corps, and I came to Portland, Oregon, and I look at myself today, and by George, things have changed. I'm even looking at my guests that I have with me now. Things have changed, and So anyway, so the bottom line is this: I want to talk about that. I want to talk about my exposure and what has happened during those times, because I was recording this stuff, I was interviewing this stuff, and here I am today. I'm interviewing this stuff today, and I'm trying to keep things on the table to try to get more people involved by running for office, because I can't find anybody to run for office that are familiar with the issues. Very difficult. It's kind of a selfish environment, so to speak. Hard to find people that are willing to share, and to continue on with good things that might have happened during my time. Hard to find. So I just thought maybe we'd just break out. You may say I'm sort of on in random, because that's exactly where we're living. We're living in a random. We don't know what the heck's going on. But anyway, so I thought what we'd do today is that I'd bring another person at the table that's sort of like gone through the same sorts of conditions. Now look at this thing. This thing is ringing all over the place. I can't answer the phone right now, but I will answer the phone for you. You're going to have to go. I'm on TV right now, okay?
Oh, okay. I'll be there in 10 minutes.
Okay, goodbye. But anyway, as you can see, things are happening constantly, and that's another guest that I'll probably be doing a show with after we've talked. Now, sort of continuation. Someone who might be, he happened to be either the campaign manager for Gonzalez, who's running for city of Portland, which is interesting. That was an interesting race. I don't even know who the guy was. And then there was the idea that there was just going to be this other guy. I mean, we were already on Luquaine. We were already on that deal. So bang, we was on that piece. And so now we got a whole new different person. And I'm trying to figure out who is this person. And so anyway, that was the person that I might be doing a show with at another point in time. But today I have Donna Maxey on. And Donna's been around quite a bit. And she's been very active with Race Talk. You might not have seen Race Talk, but it's out there. It's on YouTube. You can Google it. You can do the Race Talk and get a better feel for what it is. But the fact of the matter is, she was very progressive in terms of trying to transition, if you will, us into basically where we're all brothers and sisters. But by George, it's a tough job. That's a tough job. And so I thought it would have been neat to bring her on, and she and I are just going to have a chat, and we're going to talk about where we've been, so to speak, but we're going to be speaking a little bit more in presence, because we need to talk about those issues, because I'd like to do more work, because that's what we need to do. But it has to make sense now. I mean, we've been around for so long that we just can't just do these kinds of things, and we're not getting the comprehension from the folks that we're trying to communicate to. It's a tough situation, folks. Trust me, it is. But so the bottom line, that's what we're gonna do this hour. We're gonna spend a time with Donna, and every so often, naturally, I'll have a good feel for it because I'll be able to listen to where she's at, and if it dittos me, fine. If not, we'll just keep talking with Donna because as far as I'm concerned, I'll ditto everything she says. That's what it's all about. So with that, Donna, welcome.
Thank you for having me on
Welcome,
your show,
Donna.
Bruce.
Welcome, Donna. I tell you, wow. It's been interesting ever since you opened up this race talk, and then ever since I opened up Oregon Voters Digest.
How many years have you been on now?
Oh my God, let's see, since 80, 82, 83.
Wow.
Wow,
Wow.
been here at Oregon Voters
That's
Digest.
that's 40 years.
Yes. In fact, on that, just Rogers Cable opened up. When Rogers Cable opened up, I was there at the table.
Okay.
And it was Neil Goldsmith that really put all of this. We got a very complicated, well oiled, if you will, group because we were on Sandy Boulevard and we came here and so I've been here for that much of a time. It just blows your mind.
40 years.
That's right.
You are to be applauded and lauded
Jesus Christ.
for your dedication.
Oh my God.
This is more than a notion. Were you always on weekly?
Oh no! At one point in time, I was on weekly. But remember Larry Dunham? Remember Larry
Yes.
Dunham? Well, Dunham was one of the technicians way back when, and that's how I got in this deal. But it was a weekly deal. First, it was Northeast Spectrum first,
Right.
and then he couldn't get any hosts. After somebody just spoke for a couple of minutes, that was it. And so here I was a Marine recruiter. George Page was doing that at the time, so I was on cable a little bit with him, and because I was recruiting, right, Marine Corps type stuff. And the next thing you know, Larry calls me up and said, "Bruce, how would you like to come on our show? I mean, I'm having problems getting a producer." And so next thing I know, I'm sitting up there, and I said, "Okay, fine, I can talk."
So let me ask you a question since
Yes.
you have the 40-year perspective. What do you see is the difference between 2022 and 1982?
Well, isn't that something? The only thing I can say is that I don't see any difference. I've got stuff in the can that I've done that talks to today. It's just bigger. And even during that particular time, I was looking for solutions and I was talking to solutions. At least I was aware of it because I was a Marine recruiter. So consequently, at the end of the day, the person's going to get recruited in the Marine Corps.
Right.
You got me? So I always knew that there had to be an end, right? And I was always, every show that I've done, I always kind of like had something at an end. And I had certain specifics at that point in time, which was Northeast Spectrum, i.e. the black community. There was Joyce Harris and a lot of the other folks that were there. And there were the issues of education was big in during that particular time, and we were having issues with the system over there, and so my point, and we're still having. So when I think about today,
But I think the issues are bigger
That's
now
what I'm saying, bigger.
than they were before. We've had a pandemic,
okay,
and now people are concerned about life and death.
okay,
It's kind of slackened, but it's still there's still the pale of it hanging over. And then times have changed. Young people, when I was in the 80s, I still had a sense of excitement for the future. I had a sense of what am I going to do to help make this a better future?
Okay.
And young people are in a different position right now because you get young people, and this is one of the things that really is depressing to me, is that a lot of young people who have put in the work to become educated, to be mindful of the issues of our day, are not having children. And the
Good point.
people who are having children are people who are less mindful of the issues less capable financially to help their children understand those issues and be in control of helping to control those issues. So it's a whole different day and age, and young people are very discouraged. You know, kids are like, well, it reminds me of when I was in teaching in Oakland. I taught at an elementary school, and I remember it went up to sixth grade, and there were some of the sixth graders talking about what they were going to wear at their funeral. And I'm like, what? And so that was a very real possibility that, you know, like sixth grade graduation coming up in tuxedos and the balloons and the big cars and all of that stuff. And what was pointed out to me was that for some of these kids, this would be the only graduation ceremony that they ever had. That there would not be a junior high or a high school graduation, and or a college, you know, God forbid, a college education where they graduated and had the celebration. So it was a very bleak outlook. And I see young people having that same bleak outlook in terms of weather, in terms of health, in terms of all the social situations that are going on. And you and I were just looking at some articles, one talking about countries getting ready to leave the underneath the crown in England, that there were 58 countries that were underneath the English rule, and many of them, Canada leading the way, saying we want out. So the question is, England now supports them with an army and all of their alliances that they have. So once they leave from being underneath England, which, you know, it reminds me of a teenager saying, I can't wait to get out of my parents' house. Well, great. But now you're going to have all the bills yourself. You're going to have to make all of the money yourself. And so how have these countries really gone through and looked at what are the possibilities? And until they get totally on their feet, who's going to step in and be a world power to take over, to possibly invade their country? And I'm seeing China and Russia use two different techniques of doing that. The United States England is a prime example of it. England went in and killed off major portions of the world, of people, indigenous people, to come in and take over their lands and move their people out to those lands. The United States has followed suit, little less aggressive than England was, going in more as a military force and setting up military protection, but still being a colonizer. And China and Russia are showing us two different ways of doing it. China has gone into Africa and has bought up bunches of the infrastructure and helping to rebuild countries. So these countries will be indebted to China for centuries, centuries to pay it off. And for instance, I'll give you an example of what I'm speaking of. Haiti just recently, in the last, I think, 10, maybe 15 years, paid off France for the fact that Toussaint Louverture overthrew Napoleon Bonaparte and the French government, and Haiti was an independent country. So this is why Haiti suffers. Haiti is the only country in the world that has overthrown one of the major European powers and been independent. They did it with a violent overthrow. So, but what they did is they hobbled Haiti so that it could not build its infrastructure and educate its people and do a good job with all the debt, because they had to pay France for their losses, for where France had come in and been a conquering country and had taken over, and so they lost all of their sugar factories and all the the mineral rights and everything that they had to that island. So they needed to pay France back for that. So that's an example. But in here now we have China, which is not coming in as an invading country, but it's coming in with money and technology and helping to build the country's infrastructure. And then we have Russia in the Ukraine that is doing it the old-fashioned way. We're just going to come in and start
Take it.
blowing stuff up and take it.
By annexation,
Is that what you call it?
Yeah, a little annexation.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm a little off on that. But those are issues that young people are facing, and and then we're seeing that there's the weather issue. Why are major corporations not stepping back and saying, okay, we're going to stop doing our way of doing business? We're going to continue our old way of doing business, even though we know it is killing the environment. And it's kind of reminds me of a joke, not a joke, unfortunately, but there was a consternation because they were trying to bring water to the surface. There was a drought, and they were trying to bring water to the surface. They knew that there was water down there in the water table down below, but there was all these layers of rock and such that they needed to get it out. And so they were trying to brainstorm how to get this water to the surface. And a guy came in and said, oh, I can get the water to the surface for you. And says, okay, so what's your solution? Well, you just drill down and you put a atomic charge in there, and it goes down into the surface rather than coming up. It goes, set it so it goes down, and it'll crack up all of the rock bed, and the water will seep through the cracks and come up. And, people were all excited about it. And then somebody said, well, won't that water be contaminated with atomic waste? He said, yeah, but that's not my problem. You asked me how to get the water to the surface.
But they did it.
Right. This is how you get it to the surface. Now, you need to get somebody else to worry about how to make sure that the water is safe and healthy. So it's that kind of thing that we're facing these days. And there's upheaval, as we were talking, there's upheaval in the British Commonwealth, that those countries are looking to get out from underneath the British rule. And I don't blame them. It's a form of servitude, a form of enslavement, whether you can say it's not, but it is. And the United States has that same kind of hold all over the world where we have places. Japan, we were just looking at where Japan's government has all been erased. Their prime minister was assassinated a month ago. And so now they're getting all new people in. What was the other one? Oh, Canada's saying we want out of the Commonwealth. We want to be independent and free. We've got here in the United States our social unrest here. And this is part of the reason these things, what happened January 6th, I saw it coming 20 years ago. I was not surprised when it happened.
Really?
No. Not at all.
But and just a small break at this point in time with regards to what I've been listening to. But what about the masses? I mean, I could see where a few people were doing all those things you were saying, pretty well in control. But now, all of a sudden, today, and the masses weren't involved. They were just basically working for a living, getting whatever they could get, right? And the drugs thing, and all this other stuff. I mean, the little people.
Well,
What happened to the masses? And what about the? Well, was there any sign of getting it to the educated table to educate people about what was going on through media or whatever? Was that being done?
I think there are a lot of forces going on concurrently. We have 99% of the wealth of this country, of the world, but of this country, we'll just look at the United States, is held by 1% of the population.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm talking about. What about that 90%? 99%, whatever.
Well, I think that people are what has happened before is that the white, we're going to put it in racial terms. It is racial, but it's mostly class.
Okay.
And there's a difference between the two. Thomas Jefferson started this with the Virginia Papers, talking about the inferiority of black people and making white people a solid group. Not the Germans, the Russians, the English, the French, but making them a group as white people. Because there were, and this is part of the critical race theory that people don't know about, is that there were servants who came over from England, from the European countries. They were indentured servants. And so they had to work off a debt to pay their way over here. So they were trained to maybe be a blacksmith or to be a carpenter or a printer. And so they had to pay for their travel from where they came. When they got here, they had to live somewhere and eat somewhere. So they had to pay all of this back to the people who paid for them to come. And the indentured servants were about half a step above the slaves, the enslaved Africans that were brought here. And so there were a number of rebellions that happened with the indentured servants and the Africans working together.
Right.
To overthrow. Because if you look at a plantation and, and the reality of the Civil War was not fought to free the slaves. It was, in a sense, it was fought to free the slaves because the South had an unfair advantage over the North. The North had more indentured servants, and the South had enslaved people who were working for free. So you have a group saying, wait a minute, our power is leaving us, and we want to set this so that it's even kill, so we're going to get rid of their free labor. Because we're having to pay for our labor, we're going to get rid of their free labor. And that's what that was about, was more to give more of an advantage to the North to have the same equal footing as the South in terms of power. So that's where, and this is what a lot of, in our country, a lot of people don't realize is how much of this country was built on the backs of the enslaved African people, who were not ignorant people who came here. They were people who were farmers, they were scientists, they were mathematicians, they were politicians. They came from all walks of life and came with all kinds of knowledge when they came here. A great example is Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker put together the first working clock with working parts in this country. And so that was one of the things he did. He also was supposedly, the story when I was a kid was that Benjamin Banneker's slave master was an architect and had outlined the plan, the city plan for Washington, D.C. It has that unique structure of having the government, seat of government in the center, and then all of the branches, it all branches out, the streets all branch out from there.
Right.
But supposedly there was a fire, and he overturned his lantern, and it burned up the plans. And his slave had a photographic memory and redrew the plans. And I remember as a kid thinking, now that doesn't make any sense. If he drew the plans, why would his slave remember the plans but not him? And so it has taken many generations, but it has finally come out, and it is said explicitly that Benjamin Banneker is the one who was the architect for laying out the city of Washington, D.C. But that was very typical of what was going on. So you had people who had knowledge and skills that were helping the South be ahead. And we still have some of those situations now when people are still fighting for power around the world. And in this country, what Thomas Jefferson, back to my point about Thomas Jefferson and white people, Thomas Jefferson said to the poor Europeans, to the indentured servants, you are a step above the enslaved people. You don't want to connect with them. And so a lot of the animus that has happened is between the working class, the poor working class white people, and people of color, because I liken it to a 100-meter race that poor white people start at zero all the way up to the uber wealthy who are at plus 97, and that's their starting point. There's a great video called excuse me, the video is called The Unequal Opportunity Race. Excuse me for a second.
Sure.
It's called The Unequal Opportunity Race, and it shows how white males were given an advantage over females, white females, and that white females, and how generational wealth was passed down. And it's about a 4.5 minute video, but it's very telling. It's critical race theory in a cartoon in 4.5 minutes, the history of this country. And so what happened was that poor white people had some advantages. There were so many advantages that happened. You know, we look at like the land grants, where people came in and have I think there's a movie that Tom Cruise was in as a young man. He and Nicole Kidman, I think that's where they met, was about, you could go and all the land that you could lay out, they gave you a day to start, and they went out and laid out all this land. They had come from Europe, been poor, and so they staked out all this land. So for free, but they didn't know how to farm. So the government set up.
Sorry about that.
I guess you have to turn your phone off.
Yeah, I guess I did that. I thought I did that. Nowadays, you never know. Okay,
so
cool.
they didn't know how to
Okay.
they didn't know anything about planting crops.
Okay.
And so the government set up classes to teach them how to farm the land, and gave them subsidies when they didn't make their crops. So all of this was set up, and we talk about affirmative action. This was affirmative action. And this is how these people got wealth to pass down in generations to their children. Well, now we have the Uber businesses coming in, buying up the small farmers. And a lot of the small farmers can't afford to do their product. Before, they had large families to help work the land and stuff. Now they don't have as many kids. And the farms are huge. So it's a whole different situation. Plus, we have what has happened in black communities for generations is now happening in white communities with these drugs. Fentanyl. The family that that owns a company that makes fentanyl, which is oxycodone, oxycontin, they knew that was addicting. And they set up, they knew that if you gave it, you needed to have it every 4 hours in order to not have withdrawal. But instead, they said, take one every 6 hours. So then you become dependent and have the withdrawal symptoms, and you need that more. And so you have a dependency on it. I mean, it's just devious and it's cruel. But the point is that people of color understand that we are on the bottom of the totem pole. As I was saying, poor white people start at zero. People of color start behind that line. Based on color, back to black people at the back at minus 50. And as I like to say, we're back there at minus 50, blindfolded, one leg tied behind our back, carrying a piano. And those of us who can make it when the gun goes off, we end up either slightly behind, even, and even on occasion, slightly ahead. And you say, how do you do that? And it's like, you know, from the very beginning, you have to do more and you have to work harder. And you have to produce at a level that is just crazy. And that's how they manage to make it. Now, not everybody can make it. But you know yourself, having come from a small southern town, that you had to work really hard for the opportunities you had. And you're a big town hero in your age group, becoming a Marine recruiter. That was a big thing. There weren't black people doing those sorts of things generally when I was young. So it's a whole different point of view, and who is really being duped, because people of color understand what's going on. We understand that we still have racism that we suffer from. We still understand that while there might be opportunities, that there are consequences, and that we might end up being laid off. I've had a couple of different experiences myself, where as a teacher, I'm a retired teacher, educator, and there was a district in California and there was a district here in Oregon that they both tried to fire me. And what was so interesting about it is that they tried to fire me, said I wasn't doing my job or whatever, but they didn't have to. I was a first-year teacher in their district. So when a person is a first-year teacher, you can decide not to sign their contract, to re-sign them to be hired. The first 3 years that you are, before you have tenure, the first year they can just say, we won't rehire this person. No questions asked. After the second year that a person's been in the district, then you have to give cause for why you're not rehiring that person. But both of these districts had the option to say, we don't want to rehire this person. And they chose to instead try to get me fired. Try to fire me, not get me fired, but to fire me. And I fought it. Thank God there was the Teachers Association, the Teachers Union. And what came out was that they had no grounds for firing me. That they could have said, okay, we don't want to hire this person back. But that's what they do frequently to people of color, particularly African American teachers. And African American teachers have a powerful sway any place they teach. This is very interesting. Do a little research on this. Whenever there is at least one black teacher in a school, all of the kids' behavior improves and the grades go up from one teacher being in the school. So clearly there is something that African American teachers understand in their teaching that has the ability to cause a positive change throughout the system. And so back to these two districts, they were not able to fire me, and in fact had to do some financial compensation for having threatened to do it in the first place. So it's just always amazing. And and here I was, a teacher who had high evaluations and lauded and everything, and it's like, oh, okay, but you're not good enough for here. So, but that's all right, they pay for it. They paid for it. But again, there's a lot going on in our country, and there's so many layers to it that's happening. And the people that I see as being really duped in this whole system are poor, working, and middle-class white people, because they, we keep thinking that people are going to leave here, the earth is becoming a mess, and people are going to leave and go to another planet. They're not going to take those people. They're not going to take those people. They've been recruiting to build Mars and the moon, recruiting people, because NASA's been doing that for, more than 5, 10 years.
And so that was the whole object and the goal of NASA.
Well, it
Somewhat.
was working on it. I mean, it was,
Not for the
race.
masses. Not for the masses.
No, it's never about the masses. Think about it. When the crown came over here to America, who got big land grants? William Penn got Pennsylvania. There's all these other places where big land grants were given to the upper class, and that's how they got what they have. So, so your everyday working class people not going to be considered part of the group to go to Mars or to the moon. We're here on ship Earth, and it's got a hole in the hull, and we better learn how to get along so that we all can survive.
Oh, you're saying to me that the more people are becoming more aware now that the group is some of those folks in that group are sort of like seeping out and say, hey, where's my share?
I think there's a lot of fear, and I think that poor working class and middle class white people are looking in the wrong direction. They are looking at people of color, because when I started Race Talks, I knew that there were going to be, by 2040, there's supposed to be more people of color than there are white people in this country. The part that I find so amazing to me is that if you look at the Klan, or we were talking about some articles that had come out about the Klan. If you look at the Klan, or a lot of the animosity and like the whole voting piece, that's aimed at black people. But black people are only 13% of the population in this country. 13% of the population. So the majority of people who are, now we have been the front runners in getting in the fight to have social rights for our group, and by us getting social equity, then it also brings in and makes it better for everybody else. And poor people, poor white people, benefit from all of the things that African Americans have fought for. But they don't see that. They still have this mentality of, well, at least I'm not a part of this group. And they see themselves as maybe being able to sit at the table with the big boys who have a lot of money and power. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Again, I'm listening, and in most cases, I guess the things that I've been dealing with for a number of years has been that group. And
Which group are you speaking of?
The lower class. A lot of times people say middle class, they were just little small tidbits, but that group below that class aspect, and that's the majority in bulk of this country.
Right.
You got me? And then our education system looking at that piece, and again, I guess I make the point because when I left Vietnam and I came to Portland, Oregon, and the whole issue of affirmative action and race was sort of an issue aspect of it, and that was the discussion of the day. I didn't understand. I mean, some of the things that we're talking to now, I didn't understand that was by design.
Oh, yeah.
All by design. But again, at the same time, people were aware of that. But they also own the dollars to do one way or the other, and are the media. These are the most articulated folks. I mean, those are the folks. I mean, we see it every day.
And there's a lot. We're being manipulated by the media too. I want to give an example of an ad I saw recently on YouTube.
Yeah.
And because I deal with these sort of things, I'm looking at, when I see things, I'm like, okay, what did I just see? And what is the purpose of this? And what does this mean? So it was talking about how the earth has got so many problems, and there are issues, and that there's disease, and there's famine, and there's and social unrest. And when they were saying the words disease and famine and social unrest, they showed a picture of a black male. And then they said, but we have to work together with our neighbors, and all of us working together can make this happen. And then that was just pictures of white males and females. And it's those subtle things that are constantly working on people's brains. You know, to say, how do you know to to think negatively? Because there's a lot of negativity, particularly toward black people.
Yeah.
So, we're 13% of the population.
Yeah.
13%.
Okay, let's say we're 13%, and I'm bringing it back to Portland again. I've been working in this area.
Where we are less than 6%.
That's what I'm saying. See, and it's just sitting there about the whole issue of gentrification. That word was thrown out there, saying there was gentrification. People that were having discussions around gentrification, but the definition of gentrification where was the solution? And what was the cause? It was there. And the entity that pretty well had control of that cause owned this. I mean, the Klan, here's the situation with the Klan situation today. We've got one newspaper, the Portland Tribune, that's front page in this stuff about the Klan. I mean, who knew about their history back in 1922 aspect of it? Got me? And you read this stuff, and then and for this particular issue right here, as I look at it, that was the so-called, as we know today, the Oregonian.
Where is that building located?
This is on the corner of Southwest. It was in Southwest Washington. Wait a minute, let me see. It doesn't exist. And it's right there, Broadway Theater. Wait a minute, it's in the center. Wait a minute, hold on for a minute. Let me see if I can get this. Ah, gee whiz. Oh yeah, Southwest Washington 11th and Washington.
Yeah, because I remember the building.
Beautiful building. Mm-hmm. That was the major newspaper for the state.
And it was run by the Klan.
Yes. No, not run by the Klan. No, it was a private entity, but they challenged the Klan when they came here.
Gotcha.
You got my point? But then when they challenged them, they all of a sudden they just didn't exist. They were protested. I mean, the whole 9 yards. They were threatened, and they lost their whole business. But in all due respect, if you get a copy of this issue, you can Google it too. But it's quite this history that we wouldn't have known.
Another good source of information about Oregon's past is the Oregon Fair Housing.
Yeah.
And that's an organization that was started. Leroy Patton was one of the founders of that organization, and they help people if there's any kind of prejudice in them going out to get housing, then they can come to Oregon Fair Housing and file a complaint, and that helps with it. But Oregon Fair Housing has a bus tour, and it's really hard to get on this bus tour. But I know I haven't done it in a few years, but Race Talks actually had a couple of tours, couple of dates that we paid for people to come. So the bus tour talks about sites of racism here in Portland.
Again, I'm still, you know where I'm going with this thing. I mean, now you got bus tours.
Hey, it went through and it showed all the different neighborhoods. I mean, it's an amazing history of what has happened. I'll give you a couple of examples of what happened. Right now, we're sitting here in Northeast Portland.
Yeah.
This used to be the black community.
Yeah.
But it's not anymore.
Right.
because we've been moved out.
Right.
Also, during down where the used to be the Multnomah Athletic Club, but now it's the Mac Club,
Yeah.
where the Mac Club is. Those hills up in there, those used to be all Asian farms, Chinese, Japanese farms, and that was land that belonged to them, and it got taken from them. So all of these, yeah, this is all,
But that's history.
yeah,
And you can get that history. You can go to Oregon Historic Society, right?
right.
Right? But you can't go to the public schools.
Well, again, I was looking at a tape that we did before, and one of the things that you have to understand how people are educated as teachers. The teachers are educated by, it's a social construct, all of this. And by social construct, it means that there are no particular rules, but it is set up by those people who are in power to make decisions. Now, when you come to textbooks, the publishers look at who wants the most textbooks printed. Well, the state that has the most textbook need is Texas.
Yeah, that's
So
right. As we control that.
all of the textbooks that are geared toward what Texas wants in those textbooks. Now, the other states buy books, and they might not like those books, but they're going to have to pay a higher price for a different set of books. So what most states do is they just buy the books that are already prescribed
That Texas has.
by, and Texas is the one who makes that decision.
Wow.
So
But if we know that, and we've always dealt with the North and the South aspect of it, and you think about the whole issue with as you say, the Civil War aspect of it, and the South during that particular time was very much involved, and a lot of the slave owners moved to Texas. Fair?
and a lot of people who were from the South moved to Oregon,
Yeah.
which is why
Yes.
Oregon had exclusionary laws to keep blacks and Asians out of Oregon. Which,
And blacks. There were some articles about that here.
yeah, no, I said blacks and Asians.
Blacks and Asians.
But the part that I find most interesting about it is that Oregon used to belong to Mexico. And they get upset that the Mexicans are coming into California and Texas and all of that. And as some of my Latino friends say, we didn't move. The border moved. We were here. This is where we were before. So the border moved down, and now people are upset that they are here. And then there's also the Bracero laws during the 40s, 30s, 40s. When and I want to say this might have gone back to World War I, but I know for sure World War II. There were a lot of the soldiers were gone, and so they didn't have people to do the crops. And so they passed the Bracero Act and brought Mexicans up to work the fields. And so they were all over the country. They, up in Ohio and some up near the Canadian border and stuff. And so those people were there working. So the Bracero Act, then after like 20 years, they wanted to tell them all to go back. It's like, we don't have anything in common. We don't know about Mexico. We might be Mexicans, but we don't know. That might be our lineage, but that's not what we know. What we know is the United States. But then they decided when the soldiers came back, then they decided they want to get rid of them. So it's a huge social mess, and I don't think it's been thought through.
Well, at this point, we got about 8 minutes or so. And we've been talking about this stuff for years, and but at the same time, more needs to be done. The communication should be in an organized fashion more today it's needed more today than ever, if you will. because we're in a major change, worldwide for that matter, and this country is going to be dependent upon whether or not we get our act together, because we have been the force, if you will, that educated the world to a certain degree.
That's true.
You got me? And so now, if you lose that, we don't have a world. I'm not trying to exaggerate or something.
And there are a lot of people who are leaving this country
Yeah.
to go to other
Yeah,
countries,
hey.
and the problem is that those countries have the same issues.
Yes, we already, those folks who we brought here to educate went back to that country and said, hey, this is ours.
Well, but I'm just saying, I can tell you of two friends who were both white. When Trump was elected, they got up out of here. One went to Mexico, one went to Canada. I have black friends who have moved to other countries, some to Mexico, some to Ecuador, some have gone back to Africa, different countries in Africa. So people are moving, but the issues are the same
The same,
everywhere.
they're the same.
And so your money might stretch a little further over there
But hey,
than here, but the issues are still the same,
right.
and it's just a matter of time
That's right.
until it's the powder keg explodes.
that's right, that's right. That's
And
right.
so, what we have to do
Well, I
is
ain't going
learn to
nowhere.
get it.
I'm not going nowhere.
Okay, okay,
This is my home.
I hear you. I'm thinking on it. I'm trying to figure out what I'm
you
doing.
know, you can get on a plane and you can. Now,
But a
in fact,
plane ride
nowadays-
does not change
well,
the
nowadays
situation.
I can go anywhere in the world on TV.
Okay. But there are issues.
Okay.
One of the things I wanted to share with you before I get off this set with you is that I have retired as the executive director of Race Talks.
Oh, not yet. That's a whole different discussion. I hear that.
That's another
Yeah, in
discussion.
fact, if anything, I'd say we do now. That's what I'm sharing with you right now. We got to continue these conversations for the viewing audience.
I would
okay?
love to bring in our
So
new executive
why
director.
don't we do,
and
in all due
introduce
respect,
you.
why don't we do that next week? I can do
Okay.
something. I can do something like that next week.
Okay.
Let's put that together.
Okay.
Then because I'm saying to you, to the viewing audience, now understand from me, we're not bona fide racists. I know that for a fact.
Well, hold on now. Let me
Oh,
say this. We
talk
can't
to
be
me.
racist.
Okay.
You can't be a racist if you don't have the power of the system behind you. You can be prejudiced,
And be prejudiced.
which means that you make judgments against people on a personal level. But racism has to do with having power of the system
Okay.
to keep people from getting
Well,
their
well,
fair,
folks, that's
full
the
share.
other part of this unification thing that we're talking about between Race Talk and the Oregon Voters Digest. We've got an educator here, and you got a jarhead over here, Marine type, and I think we need to join those forces together, if you will, to talk, to communicate to people across the board, because mine was throughout my entire life. It was always basically, USA, USA. And then one day you wake up and you say, this the divide.
Yeah.
And it's really a sad note. But anyway, but the long and short of it all is we're going to do more work with Race Talk.
And we're looking forward to it.
Please. Okay, good.
While I'm retired, I have
Good.
not totally
No, you
disappeared
have
from
not
the scene.
retired. You have not retired. You have not retired. I've not retired. I'm still in the Marine Corps.
Gotcha.
You see the garb? I'm still in the Marine Corps. No, but my point is, I think it's very important, and I think it would be good and good for all, and especially the masses, because they're being thrown. Only so many people can play basketball.
Okay.
So many people can run football. But what about the rest of the masses? I mean, when you look at this homeless situation that we have here now, people are just one step from there. I mean, people can't make their mortgage bills.
Right.
They can't work. Yeah, we're having some tough times, and then to a certain degree, you can't hire, you can't incarcerate them all. You can't hang them. You can't execute them. Aspect of it. So consequently, if it gets down to that point where saying, if I want 3 meals a day, a roof over my head, and a place to sleep, all I have to do is create a crime. I can go right down to the local supermarket and steal a chicken. Oh, you understand
you
what
don't
I'm
even
saying?
have to do that. You
know
don't
what
even
I'm
have to
saying?
do that.
Just go down there and with a rock or something. Well, anyway, I don't want to get caught up in that piece aspect of it, but we are there. It's really a
Yeah.
sad note aspect of it. So we need to do some work aspect of it. So I'm saying to you that, hey, with those few good years that we've got left, if you will, we're going to dot the I's from where we've been and hopefully hand the baton out to those viewing audience that are sitting there, getting them more involved and getting them some sense of purpose, if you will, so they can feel comfortable and say, okay, fine, no, everything is not lost.
Well, I want to say to your viewing audience that the bottom line is that there's a hole in this boat called Earth, and we all have to work to mend that hole, and we also all have to work together
Yes.
to clear the water out, to clear out the problems that are with the boat.
Yes.
So, if we don't do that, none of us will
Yes.
survive.
Yes. So this is unification here. All right.
All right.
This is again. It's a start, and we might be able to bring more people at the table, if you will,
Sounds good.
if they identify basically with what we're talking about. It's a very serious note.
Yeah.
We cannot continue to divide. We cannot do that, and so it's very, very important. And like I said, we've been having this discussion for an hour, and you think about how many folks really got on to what we were talking about. We covered so much, but the only way I understood it because I've been there, and you've been there. So here we are. We're the translators, and now we got to break it down in basic terms to that viewing audience, which is the masses,
Right.
and get these discussions among themselves. Is that
Well,
fair?
that's what Race Talks is trying to do, and that's what we encourage people to do. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know the people you work with, other than just hi, how you doing. Quick example of why this is important. I encourage my neighbors to get to know each other all the time. Me being Susie social, I know everybody, but one of our neighbors had a fire, and nobody was able to help him, and I was talking, nobody knew his name or his phone number. I was talking to another friend that lives in
Real
out
quick,
in
we got
East
about-
County,
about 40 seconds.
and their neighbor's house was on fire, and they were trying to beat on her door and tell her that her house was on fire. They didn't have her phone number.
Wow.
So get to know your neighbors. Get to know their phone number. Get to know their names.
And you're going to be doing more because what I'm going to be doing with some of her shows that you had with Race Talk, we're going to be playing them with Oregon Voters Digest.
Okay.
And vice versa. I will be very much involved with Race Talk and do some things, whether it be political or something of that nature. But that's where my lane is. Okay, good. Donna, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your
I
time.
really
and
appreciate
thank you
you
very
having
much. Looking
me here.
forward to seeing you next week. buddy.
All right.
Okay, fine. Again, this is Bruce Broussard and Donna Maxey of Race Talk, Oregon Voters Digest. We're going to do something, folks. Have a good day. We'll see you next week. Enjoy.